Gildan Media presents Your Coach in a Box, affordable, life-changing audio programs.
The Real Purpose of Parenting, the book you wish your parents read, by Dr. Phillip Dembo. The Real Purpose of Parenting, the book you wish your parents read, is dedicated to the memory of one of the greatest kids who ever lived, Jonathan, my stepson, who passed away when he was only 13 years old. Jonathan embodied everything this book is about. His spirit lives on inside each one of us who knew him in each one of the pages of my book. We miss him dearly. Acknowledgements. There are many people I want to acknowledge and thank for helping me realize this dream of writing my first book, The Real Purpose of Parenting. Projects such as this are not accomplished alone. The profound impact of sharing in the lives of my clients and families is immeasurable. I have learned so much throughout the years, and I am eternally grateful to each and every one of them for sharing their stories and trusting in me with their concerns. The Real Purpose of Parenting would never have been written without the guidance and support of my publisher, Jackie Jordan and Richard Weiner of Jackie Jordan, Inc. Their professionalism and vision have been inspirational for me in this process. I would also like to acknowledge the tremendous support I received from the staff at tvguestbert.com, including Stephanie Cobian and Jane Shane. And with their direction, I have had the privilege to work closely with the talented Margie Kay, my editor and friend, whose influence is woven throughout this book. Linda and I are so blessed to be the beneficiaries of the skills and hard work of Nicole Leuterstein, our assistant on all of our projects. We can never thank Nicole enough for all that she does to make our work easier, including the research efforts she put forth on this book. I need to thank my parents for everything they did to provide me with the life I had growing up, each in their own way and together as a couple. They worked hard to give me and my brother every opportunity this world offers. They did this with all the love and commitment a parent can have for their child. I am eternally grateful to both of them. To our children, Elizabeth, Jeremy, Rachel, Justin, and Adam, I want to thank you for your love, your guidance, your confidence, and your ever-present inspiration as wonderful young men and women. I am so proud of each and every one of you. And to the love of my life, Linda, with you by my side, everything seems possible. I love you more than words could ever express. You are the true reason I had the courage to write this book. To all of you, thank you so much for this amazing journey. The Parent Coach. My name is Dr. Phillip Dembo. I have wanted to write this book for many years, and now that you are holding it in your hands, I cannot express how humble and grateful I feel. I thought it might be helpful to share with you a little bit about who I am and what inspired me to put my thoughts on paper and share them with you. As they say, our children do not come with an instruction manual, so any help I may offer along the way, I hope may be useful and welcome. That is my wish anyway. I have been a father for 27 years, so I understand firsthand what an important and often daunting role being a parent can be. I am the dad of 2 grown kids. Are they really ever grown? Elizabeth, who is 27, and Justin, who is 21. I am also a proud and dedicated stepfather of 3 children, Rachel, 23, Adam, 21, and Jonathan, in blessed memory, who would now be 17. I also recently took on another role as a father-in-law to Jeremy, 27, Elizabeth's husband. I am married to the most amazing woman I have ever known, Linda. She is my perfect partner. I do not think that I had ever experienced the true feeling and meaning of love until I looked into her beautiful blue eyes on that fateful Friday in August 2006. I say fateful because the life experiences that brought us together are the makings of another book, maybe even a movie. But I must reserve those for a later date. Linda and I have been together and connected ever since we first spoke, in what many remark is a fairy tale courtship unlike any other they have witnessed. It seems so natural for us both, however. We never for a moment take it for granted. We just relish in our togetherness each and every day. I am Director of Life Strategies, a coaching and consulting firm. In my 30-year professional career as a therapist and life coach, I've spent literally thousands of hours with couples, families, parents, and kids, assisting them with the strategies necessary to have successful experiences. Those experiences only reinforce for me my need to write this book to you, not as a therapist, not as a life coach, but from one parent to another. My frame of reference growing up presented itself at an early age as I was born with scoliosis, curvature of the spine, and was destined for a life punctuated with physical pain. For the first 15 years of my life, my parents made straightening my spine their mission and my identity. With all loving intentions, I was taken from doctor to doctor, procedure to procedure, yielding no real success. Everything available medically today for the treatment of scoliosis was either not suitable or too risky for me then. From age 7 to 12, my torso was wrapped into a plaster body cast. I'm not sure if it helped my spine, but it clearly did little for my social life and self-esteem. You see, this was my first realization that in families, parents can be driven more by what something looks like than by what it is. My voice didn't seem to matter to them. My feelings were never questioned. My physical pain was never discussed. But looking like everyone else was always the goal for them. The more they pursued their goal, the less I felt I looked normal at all. My parents were great people, don't get me wrong, and I know that they were not trying to be intentionally cruel. They just believed what many believe in our society. If a child looks or acts like everyone else, they will feel normal. For them, normal was self-esteem. Throughout my personal and professional journey, I have been motivated by the internal struggle. I feel that we in a society continue to miss the boat on what we must create in order to maximize the potential in every person. I am struck by this belief system we still embrace, the notion that different is judged negatively. Somehow, we are made to feel that we must be the same in order to be accepted. This misconception controls our culture, directs our values and morals, and subsequently guides the parenting of our children. How is it that the judgment has woven itself into our norms, our culture? We seem to know so much about so many things, yet we resist the change necessary in our attitude to allow ourselves to evolve as individuals. My friends, parents are those assigned with the responsibility to protect the individual in each child. There is much to do, and it won't be easy to make the necessary changes to honor growth in the individual when we have judged and controlled for so very long. We must create a collective conscience in the culture by developing the conscience of each individual, one child at a time. We must change the way we have been parenting. If we learn to develop that conscience, that self-regulatory process in each individual, we will raise kids to live out there in the world as individuals, fully developed and with a healthy sense of self. Welcome to the real purpose of parenting. Let's get busy. Disclaimer. Throughout my 30-year career as a therapist and a life coach, I've had the pleasure of sharing in the lives and stories of literally thousands of families. The names and details of some of my encounters have been altered to respect the privacy and integrity of the relationships I have developed with these families over the years. All the stories depicted in this book could represent any number of actual families, and no one family is being singled out. Please try to experience the message in the stories rather than merely searching through its details for some familiarity. It is my hope that you can relate to and gather insight from all of the material included and realize that in reality, we are all depicted here in one way or another. Thank you. Chapter 1. From One Parent to Another. Any parent who frequents a library or most any bookstore will certainly find rows and rows of books on parenting. And so, you may wonder, what would possess someone to tackle the subject again and write yet another parenting book, thinking that in any way possible, it would have something different to say or add to the dialogue on this ever-frustrating and complex topic of being a parent in today's world. I came to the conclusion that although there are numerous wonderful books on parenting, as with most important topics and issues, the more perspectives we gather, the better. So I encourage you to search through these books and find the ideas that resonate with you most. I ask only that you read this book first. I am a parent just like most of you. I am someone else's child just like all of you. I have my observations, experiences, and opinions as each of you do. My goal is to share with you my conclusions and suggestions based on being a son, being a father, and having the opportunity professionally for 30 years to share intimately in the lives of thousands of families just like yours and mine. As I sit here today writing this book, I recognize that I made many mistakes as a son and many more as a parent. So I am writing this for me as much as I am writing this for you. I work hard every day of my life to be a good parent and make the necessary changes in order not to make those mistakes anymore. Once you are a child, you seem to always be a child. Once you are a parent, you are always going to be a parent. The big question is, what kind of parent are you going to be? And are you willing to change what's necessary to be effective? This book is about all of us and the culture we live in. It's not about divorced families or kids with ADD or drug addiction or the latest trends in potty training per se. Those are topics you'll find in the other specialty books. This is a book about the thread that runs through all of the issues, all diagnoses, all children, all parents, and all families. This is about raising a conscience as you raise a child. Let me tell you a story. About 10 years ago, I met 17-year-old Brian Smith and his parents in my office. They came to me after years of struggle between the three of them, mainly about Brian's lack of effort in school. The Smiths are a strong Catholic family, financially successful, and overall very pleasant people. Brian was in his spring semester senior year at his second private all-boys Catholic high school. He was asked to leave the first school he attended after his sophomore year because of poor grades and disrespectful behavior. Brian was failing 2 classes at his current school, and his parents were fearful he was not going to graduate on time. They brought him to me to coach him into becoming a student capable of pulling his grades up enough so that he could graduate with his class and go off to college, like everybody else. The difficulty here was that the truth was inconsistent with the picture the parents had for their son. This wasn't about whether Brian was capable enough to do well. That discussion, frankly, had long passed. The truth in front of us was that Brian had no intention of being a student. Therefore, he was unwilling to put forth the effort to meet the goals of his parents. Unfortunately for everyone, No one was willing to have that conversation. With 4 weeks left in the semester, 5 weeks to commencement, the parents had to do something. So they brokered a deal with the private high school, which, by the way, you cannot broker with the public schools in our community, to allow Brian to walk with his class in the graduation ceremony with an empty diploma sleeve. He would then attend summer school after graduation and complete the classes necessary to fill the sleeve with a real diploma. Why? Because the Smiths were mortified about Brian's truth and couldn't face his grandparents or the community and tell them the truth that Brian chose not to perform as a student and did not complete his necessary requirements. So the illusion of success was much more important to them than the truth of Brian. Brian was not a student. Graduation came, as did the elaborate graduation party the Smiths orchestrated for Brian. His grandparents, extended family, and friends all attended the festivities, and each and every one of them was so proud of his accomplishments. The main question of the day was, so what college have you decided on? What college have you decided on? Are you kidding me? Sorry. Brian and his parents put brave, confident smiles on their faces and without hesitation gave an answer pleasing to all in attendance. You see, the Smiths brokered another deal. They had to, because once you replace a truth with an illusion, you must keep it going in order to present the picture you want the world to see. If Brian was indeed graduating with everyone, he was certainly going off to college with everyone. Brian's parents found a college with low requirements that were willing to admit him on probation. Good for Brian, good for the Smiths. Summer came and went with much struggle and emotion. The Smiths could not understand how Brian didn't see the importance of his summer school class performance. Brian went off to school kicking and screaming. Mrs. Smith actually had to write several of his papers for him, but by God, they accomplished their goal, and Brian and his mother passed both classes. His parents received his diploma in the mail, slid the document into its vacant sleeve, and all of a sudden, the illusion became the truth. Same old dynamics, same old pattern. Move-in day was a wonderful milestone for Brian and the Smiths. Their little boy was going off to college, creating stories they could share with their contemporaries. For Brian, he was finally getting away from the scrutiny, the nagging, the fighting, the rules. He was finally free. Everybody says, that's just normal. Every kid feels that way, and every parent deserves that joy of seeing their child off to their next step in life. Big sigh. Who is everybody anyway? Who comes up with these norms that we must attach our truth to in order to create these pictures? Sorry, don't get me started on this now. More about that later. The semester went on peacefully and without incident. Mrs. Smith would call Brian every day to make sure Brian was getting up and going to his class, doing his homework, and making friends, just like everyone else. Brian, of course, reassured her that he was doing well, working hard, and making great friends. Brian was asked to leave the university by November of his first semester. Remember, he accepted on probation, so there was no room for brokering here. He needed to maintain a 2.0 grade point average throughout the semester to remain in school. In my office, as voices were emotionally charged, the Smiths had to come to realize that they could no longer hide from the truth. Brian was not a student. That statement meant the unthinkable to them, that Brian was a failure and could never amount to anything remotely successful. By the way, there was never a readiness on the part of the Smiths to discuss the dishonesty they promoted or the self-esteem of their child who could never seem to please them. There was never room for the conversation of what might have happened if they had a different attitude, took a different approach, listened to the struggle behind their son's resistance. Upon my recommendation, by the way, the first bit of advice that the Smiths actually followed, Brian moved out on his own and into an apartment with his roommate. He was now finally responsible for himself. He needed to find a job, work full-time, pay his bills, and find his own path. The Smiths saw this as a tragic failure and were ashamed at this course of action. As a result, they pulled away from their son for a very long while. Brian, however, thought he was on easy street. Finally, no school, plenty of freedom, and his parents off his back. I didn't hear from any of the Smiths for about 18 months until one day, as I was sitting in my inner office, an odor was permeating my waiting room. I walked out into the outer area of my office suite only to find Brian Smith sitting there in tears. The odor, by the way, was emanating from him. I knew that familiar smell. Anyone who has ever washed dishes in a restaurant or worked around deep fryers and a greasy spoon would know that smell all too well. I had the good fortune of exuding those odors myself while working throughout high school and college. Brian had been working 2 jobs to make ends meet, but his ends were never truly meeting. He asked me if I remembered him. How could I forget? I remember all the wonderful kids and families I have had the good fortune to meet. I had a free hour, so I invited him inside for some privacy. Brian's first words out of his mouth were, "I get it now. I don't want to work this way the rest of my life. I have no freedom, and I have no money. Will you help me?" We spent several visits exploring the feelings that led him to his choices. We created from those feelings a plan that reflected his goals. He wanted to stay in the food industry because he knew he wouldn't do what was necessary to finish school, because Brian now could speak to his truth. Brian was not a student. We both agreed that he still required some form of training if he was to accomplish his goal and move up the food chain. Pun intended. With a touch of good strategy, if I may say so myself, some re-educating his parents to who their son was, an honest letter, and a very good interview, Brian was admitted to the New England Culinary Institute. Today, Brian Smith is an assistant head chef at a very fancy 5-star hotel. He earns a great salary, has great benefits, and most importantly, a great attitude. So what were the Smiths so afraid of? Who defined for them this standard for their son? How is it that somehow all the years of judgment, conflict, power struggles, yelling, shame, hiding, lying, and illusion were worth continuing when they never produced the results they were looking for? What was wrong with the truth of who Brian was? Failure was so large for them, it was to be avoided at all costs. Failure, like success, is an experience to be learned from and embraced. Was Brian's outcome more important than the process of his development and the quality of the time they spent with him? This is all about the Smiths' judgment versus Brian's truth. We will talk about judgment later on in this book, but it's important here to note that when we talk about judgment, we are not talking about what a parent believes is right for their child. We are talking about parents not accepting what is real, specific, and truthful about their child, regardless of what they may believe is the right script. Ultimately and eventually, the truth of our child and their view of their experience will have to be attended to, but at what cost? If we don't find a way to empower our child to have their own experience while holding them to a set of standards we believe in, We will raise them with a distorted view of themselves. That's the real trick, isn't it? Recognizing the fine line between our agenda as the parent and their experience as a separate identity based on their view of the world as they grow up in ours. We as parents can set the culture of expectations as we see them, but we cannot control how our children experience that world. We are all the Smiths in one way or another. We all have stories where the picture of what we were hoping for was so much more important to us than what we were actually dealing with in front of us. Maybe our judgments are not as profound and our control and power are not as impactful as what Brian experienced, but are all unhealthy in the raising of our children nonetheless. Think of the level of judgment we must have and the comparative analysis required in order to fit our children into a picture when they actually don't fit. Think what we must be doing to the self-esteem of our children when we give them the message that who they are is only good enough when it coincides with the picture we have created for them. They must fit. Think about what this must mean to the development of our child's psyche, the place where one's ethics and morals, character and personality develop together to create one's identity, one's integrity. We must change our own attitude as parents and learn a different way. The parenting models of the past 50 years, post-World War II, have all addressed the self-esteem and ways for parents to attend to their child's development. But they have all fallen short in helping us understand what we really must do in order to help children develop their psyche fully. It's harder today than ever. The world our children are growing up in is faster, colder, and more intense than ever before. We do not have a collective self-esteem in this culture. We have groups of people vigilantly trying to look like one another. We have celebrity golfers, governors, actors, and presidents who make decisions that hurt many other people, but who are heralded for their confessions and remorse. Our children are growing up in a world where the picture is definitely greater than the truth. It's everywhere, on the internet, television, and every social media outlet. Our children are surrounded with these stories and our collective tolerance of the lack of integrity. We seem to have generation after generation of highly competent individuals growing up, knowing how to do many wonderful things I could never have imagined when I was a child. Yet, we see more and more of these young adults unable to self-regulate. We see more and more of these young adults who clearly know right from wrong, but don't really care. We see these young people doing whatever it is they wish to do for their own amusement, regardless of who it hurts. Remember the young Rutgers University student who committed suicide because a group of his friends played a practical joke and videotaped him kissing another young man in the privacy of his room and put it out onto the internet? Their amusement was more important at that moment than his feelings. His truth was overruled by their agenda. Is there a correlation between the Smith story and these young people I mentioned? You bet there is. The truth of one's experience without someone else's judgment is critical to the development of the individual's psyche, their conscience, and their ability to self-regulate out in the world. Brian Smith found his way to what he wanted to do in life. He found what his standard was for himself by the true experience he felt while trying to make it on his own. He has well-meaning and loving parents that under a different model with a different attitude could have been along his side, guiding him, coaching him, and loving him as he practiced his own view of the world.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?